Hi, I'm Humperdinck Jackman, CEO, ESG Pro. And the big question today is, why does the climate matter? Why should anybody in business even care about the climate? After all, Donald Trump says the climate crisis and net zero is a con. Ed Miliband wants to sell us to the Chinese. Well, I'm joined today by Megan Fraser of Climate Led. Megan, tell everybody what your business, Climate Led, is about.
So I run a business called Future Led. It's an executive coaching consultancy for climate pioneers. So essentially leaders, executives, founders in the climate space broadly. So sustainability, climate, nature. And I equip leaders at career-defining transitions, new promotions, different stage of their organization, career crossroads to lead with impact so that they can have the biggest ripple effect that they can for the climate, for their organization, and for themselves.
This is the point, isn't it? That facing up to what a business can do in response to society's overall perception of the climate does translate into both a personal advantage in business, no matter your age, your sex, gender, whatever. It can be a personal advantage, but it also transforms the perception of potential customers and potential customers as to what your business represents and why should they even be remotely interested in doing business with you? We see this all the time. Clients coming to us saying, hey, we failed this tender because we're going to miss out on 30 percentage points of our bid simply because we can't talk about what we do, what we stand for in terms of climate and sustainability. Is that summing up what you're about?
Yes. I work mostly with clients who are already in the climate space. So I'll give you some examples. I'm coaching the VP of operations at a spin-out from a Scottish university. They create sensors for renewables. So they are explicitly in the renewables manufacturing space. I'm coaching a very senior person at a public transportation company. He's responsible for making a fleet of hundreds of buses into electric buses and leading their net zero strategy. I'm coaching the founder of a embryonic early stage NGO that's trying to go global. So all these people have different ways in to the climate crisis and see the role that business can play. I think, frankly, because governments are acting too slowly and there's too much foot dragging, and because they're constantly enthralled to the next election. I think people for a long time waited for governments to show leadership. I think what's happening instead is that the private sector needs to show leadership and then governments will come along.
We see this all the time. The UK is kind of strange on everything to do with ESG and sustainability. It's lots of motivation, but very little action from the government. Very different from the European model, where it's regulatory led.
Yeah.
And in the UK, this entire topic is being led by large corporations saying, no, we're not going to be left behind, posing these topics onto their supply chain and saying, get with it or you can't be a supplier anymore.
It's very encouraging that we're seeing that, especially since Brexit, when there's fewer regulatory sticks, if you like, for companies here, and yet we're still seeing citizens, consumers, wanting companies to be more forthright in their climate commitments. And it makes a big difference in who people are buying from and the choices that they're making. So I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. With consumers, the brand which is really sort of taking their attention is B Corp. Corp's been going for many years, but the growth in the UK is just startling right now. And part of the reason why so many small SMEs are seizing on B Corp as an example is with all of the mumbo jumbo out there, with all of the, look, here's a jolly photo of a farmer on the package of eggs. It just has no resemblance to what's actually happening on the farm. B Corp is an auditing process which establishes credibility for a small business. From one person up to hundreds of thousands of people. But primarily it's about the micro business and the very small SME. The consumers will pay on average, study after study shows this, from the likes of PwC, Deloitte, McKinsey, they pay a 4 to 9% premium for products and services deemed to come from a sustainable company.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that statistic.
We see another one as well. At the other end of the scale, there's EcoVadis, French corporation. I've got to admit, I was quite skeptical about EcoVadis for many years, and I've changed my tune completely.
Tell me more.
Well, we're not just a certified B Corp, But when EcoVadis actually changed from being just a pure supply chain management assessment corporation to truly addressing both corporate social responsibility and the environment, then there's a transformation. So now to achieve an EcoVadis certification, you actually have to demonstrate environmental measures actively, or your carbon reporting needs to be comprehensive. And environmental measures, more quantified social measures. We moved from just being B Corp certified to being EcoVadis certified, and we didn't stop there. We went for EcoVadis Gold. Actually, we ranked globally in the top 3% of 150,000 corporations.
Congratulations.
And then we went even further, and EcoVadis said, "Hey, why don't you become a partner?" And over this year, we've become an approved strategic partner for EcoVadis across UK, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And now we're the only UK headquartered training partner for EcoVadis in the UK.
Wow.
Now, what's the point? The point is, it's a credible certification like B Corp, but for larger organizations. And the beauty of it is you really do go through the mill to get this certification, but anybody can do it. It could be a business of, we've got clients of 5 people and clients of many, many thousands of people. The motivation for EcoVadis, and you'll like this, is large corporations such as NatWest, HSBC, Core Hotels. They're writing to their supply chain and saying, "You're a good supplier, we like you. But if you want to continue to be a supplier, then you must become EcoVadis accredited." To become EcoVadis accredited, it's back to doing the carbon reporting, taking net zero seriously. It's like NHS Evergreen. You start off with modern slavery and so on. But to move forward, your carbon reporting must actually be approved by the SBTi. That's to get NHS Evergreen Level 3. So there's about 2.5 million UK businesses suddenly subject to, hey, if you want to supply the NHS, take climate seriously. Over to you.
I have some questions I'd love to ask you. One of them is about the changes I've heard are going to happen with B Corp. Is it next year, early next year? They're shifting the way that you'll have to become eligible?
Yep.
What's your take on the changes that are happening, and how will it impact organizations, but also climate? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
It's all good, and this is an evolution of ESG reporting. So to set the picture clearly for some listeners, B Corp, EcoVadis, they're both forms of ESG rating, just like the grandfather of them all, the Global Reporting Institute, the GRI framework, is another ESG rating. And there are others, greater and lesser importance, like CDP, nothing wrong with it, but, the 3 prime movers are EcoVadis and B Corp. And over the years, as businesses, because they're all primarily orientated at for-profit enterprises, we'll come on to that. As more and more businesses make progress, then all of these frameworks have realized that, well, you can't have everybody scoring a gold standard or an AAB rating. So the groundswell is to improve the standards, to make it more arduous, to create more granularity in the ratings, so that consumers or people in procurement and business can say, yeah, okay, that is a top-rated company. That's the one we should be using. And part of it is with B Corp and EcoVadis, but especially B Corp right now, very much in the news, environmental measures are absolutely at the forefront, as well as separating out the various pillars on which you're assessed, and now saying every business must pass each individual pillar rather than being exceptional in 2 or 3. And yeah, we won't even worry about our carbon reporting. I think it's a great thing. And it ties in with when you mentioned you're supporting an NGO and some real startups along with some large organizations. I think it really ties in with what you're trying to do and the message you're delivering.
So let me pick up on that, because one thing I think we've spoken about briefly in the past is net zero versus ESG. And I think often for a small organization, or even for bigger ones, it's easy to set your sights on net zero. Everyone knows what it means. What would you say to a company that had their sights fixed on net zero? They didn't have the pressure of having to jump through hoops for procurement. It was really up to them to choose to set their sights on ESG instead. Why ESG over net zero, and what are some of the main motivators you see these companies using if they're doing it of their own accord rather than having to for a bigger customer?
That's actually quite a complex question. So net zero is one set of ambitions aligning to a government target. Net zero is about the emissions in your direct control, scope 1 and 2. How much electricity and gas do you purchase and consume? How much fuel do you consume to operate your vehicles and your machinery, whatever it might be? It's a very, very narrow definition of carbon reporting. 96% of your carbon footprint as a business comes from your purchase, your scope 3, the emissions outside of your direct control. Business travel is one example. Upstream and downstream transportation and distribution, there's another. For many businesses, doesn't even factor. But purchased goods and services, everything you buy, from your insurance policy to your water, to a car, to a, you name it, to a Post-it note, everything you buy and every company you buy from, 6% of your carbon footprint comes from that. And net zero doesn't discuss that. So it's not telling the whole story. And if you really want to be a good corporate citizen, where's your waste going? What proportion of your waste is going into landfill or being recycled? Now, there's a message. So net zero versus carbon reporting, it's scope, it's transparency. So the government standard, the PPN 006, used to be called PPN 0621. Well, PPN 006 came into play because it was updated by the Cabinet Office to administer the whole program to conform with the new Procurement Act. Procurement Act 2023 came into effect 24th of February 2025. Now, the issue is if we really want a business to create a positive impact, then the business needs to look at all that it is doing. Now, I sum it up with people, and I lecture on this all the time, is if people are well treated in the workplace and feel secure in their jobs, are paid a living wage, can pay the rent, can buy food, can clothe their children with their school uniforms, there's less stress in their lives, they're respected, they feel valued, they're learning, they're engaged, they're supported by their employers, what happens? You have happier workers who work harder for you for the same amount of money, who represent your business, your organization better and more positively. But then something else happens. They're less angry. And if people are less angry and less afraid, they have more capacity to care about the environment. 18, 20-year-old is nipping through some village somewhere in their hot hatch Ford Fiesta, whatever it is. They've been to McDonald's, they've had their Red Bull and a can of cider. They don't just roll down the window and heave it all out. Because actually, well cared for people start to feel pride in themselves and society, and therefore they have the capacity to care about the environment. That's why the ESG component, environment, social, and governance, does all come together to form a whole. Have I actually answered the question, though?
You've answered some of it. And I really like the framing you have around, it's almost like the hierarchy of needs. And I think often those of us in the middle classes, I'm pretty squarely middle class, we kind of expect everybody to care about the environment. And yet, of course, if you're scrabbling to meet your essential needs, it's never going to be your top priority. So I really like how you frame the role of business in enabling people to feel freer, more engaged, more curious about things that aren't about putting bread on the table. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So another part of it, you see, is why is the typical business, I'm not talking conglomerates here, why is the typical business, say one turning over, let's say the majority of businesses in this country turn over somewhere between 10 and 40 million pounds. Regulatory impact on them. They're not subject to ESOS. Many of those, even when they turn over 40 million pounds, they're not subject to the SECR or SECA reporting. So what's in it for them? And in teaching, one of the principles of teaching is to always you've got to face the question, what's in it for me? What's in it for the student? And if we think of businesses or our clients as students, what's in it for them? So the carbon reporting, usually you have to outsource it to someone because scope 1 and 2, let's face it, it's pretty easy. But scope 3 is not easy. It's very, very time consuming. And then as the business gets larger and more complex, you're going to get it wrong. So that's where consultants like ESG Pro come into play. We deliver it for clients. We hold their hands through it, consultancy led, nail it. Help the business, let the business focus on what it does best. Okay, so you've got a carbon report. Go on Facebook. Hey, we've got a carbon report, and Twitter and whatever. Most businesses will say, yeah, we're going to be net zero in 2035 or 2040. Yeah, it's not much of a story. But if you take it further and start saying we have changed the way we work, we have reduced, we have eliminated waste, we have changed our product and packaging so it is less wasteful, or it's a circular economy. We buy back the products we have sold. I've got a pair of Sennheiser headphones. They were lovely 7 years ago. Now they've completely rotted on the outside. The only thing for it now is to throw them in the bin. What a waste. So go a step further and start working on the cultural changes in the business. This is the social. Why should you care as an employee? How are we looking after you? What ideas do you, the employees, have as to how our business could be more efficient, make more money? Money is good. Remember the B Corp mantra, basically. People, planet, profit. It's okay to make a profit. Just don't do it at the cost of people or planet. Now we're taking the whole net zero thought process and we're wrapping it into people. And it's that motivation and it's transparency within the organization of how it's approaching carbon and people, which gives way to governance. Without good governance, good leadership, it's going to fail. Deliver your environmental and social parts, and then you have a story to tell. Then your marketing agency or a marketing team or person, then they can bang on it on social media and advertising a lot. They've got a story to tell.
So that bridges very nicely into the role of communications. Like, it's not just enough to go through this exercise, but actually it's about giving you a better story to tell people. It helps them engage with what you're about and who they identify as being, and why there's some love there, why there's some loyalty. Makes a lot of sense.
So absolutely. So Megan, when you're working with your clients, what's your message to your clients as to the how and the why? Why should these people in transition, these new roles, how and why? How do you help them transition? And how do you explain to them the advantage for them to listen and to act?
It's a great question. I would say it depends on the kind of transition. So if somebody's at a career crossroads and they're thinking, where do I go next? Where can I have the most impact? Most of them are highly motivated by making a difference, typically in some part of the climate world. Many of them have already been in climate, but some are new to climate and they want to get into the green economy. And so then it's all about helping them to find their highest point of contribution, so that they know what's theirs to do. Often there's this paradox of success. When somebody becomes successful enough or credible enough, reputation grows, they start to get many opportunities sent their way. And if they say yes to them all, they can become diluted. So that's a very interesting conundrum for high performers. You have to help them to be focused on what feels like it's theirs to do. And then that becomes a filter by which to say yes or no to all kinds of things that come across their desk. And obviously, the more clarity they have, the more impactful they could be. So that's if they're at a career crossroads. If somebody comes into a new job, either they make a move internally, they're promoted, or they are hired into a new position, it's all about making that first 90-day period as impactful as possible. That typically means increasing their emotional intelligence. So I use a psychometric to help them do that. I think EQ is incredibly important in climate leadership. I mean, we know that EQ is very important in leadership generally. There was one really interesting study of thousands and thousands of failed hires across the board, so hires at all levels. And only 11% of failed hires, people who were laid off, people who quit, people who got very bad reviews internally, only 11% of those were due to lacking technical skills. And 89% of failures were due to lack of coachability, lack of EQ, lack of the right attitude. So it's very, very important. And I think in climate, because leaders are needing to work with so much uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, being able to hold that is really vital. So we focus on really building up their inner world of leadership, if you like, leading self, so they can lead others, then have impact. And then we create a really practical game plan for them over the first 90 days so they can hit the ground running, deliver for the organization, deliver for their team. And of course, that translates into the planet. And then lastly, people who are at a new inflection point, if you like, in their organization, so the organization is scaling, typically what they find is that what's got them here will get them where they want to go next. So they've had some skills that have been really successful, but they're required to lead people in a different way or to step out of day to day and into a more strategic place. So then it's about helping them to do that in a way that feels authentic to them and in a way that's aligned with their core values, but that also performs for the business.
Wow, fascinating stuff. I didn't realize the depth and complexity of what you do. It's brilliant. Now, can we switch to sort of digress a little bit? To my mind, one of the challenges for the very people you're trying to help is their bosses are getting a really mixed message from multiple directions. So we're not going to go into politics at all, but how do we help these people when on the one hand, there might be a middle-of-the-road conservative, there might be a centrist Labour, centrist conservative, centrist liberal. Well, Miliband's gone too far. You'll read the press, and the press is just saying, look, he's killing the North Sea, he's killing this industry, that industry, and the rest of net zero is everything. Now being contradicted by Rachel Reeves at the party conference. And then on the other hand, we've got Donald Trump saying it's all a con. Net zero is a con. That was what he said last week on the news. And he wasn't pulling his punches. And then the flip side is, the US industry overall and economy is booming. 2 states in Alabama make more cars than Europe combined does collectively. So it's all very contradictory. And if you even raise your head above the parapet on Facebook, you get screamed at by people you've never met. It's outrageous, and it gets really vitriolic and quite nasty. So somehow I think we have to try and explain to everybody, and your clients as well, that, hey, you've got to be the rational voice as to why this still needs to be part of business strategy.
I think that the challenges my clients face are a little adjacent to that, and we can unpack this a little bit. So about a third of my clients are in the US, a third in Europe, and a third in the UK typically. And what I'm finding with my US-based clients, especially right now, is a lot of wearing down of resilience for very understandable reasons. Either they're working squarely in climate or they've just been made redundant. Let's say they're working for a big corporate in sustainability. Suddenly their jobs feel like they're less secure, or they're having to reevaluate, do I still want to work in the sector? Do I want to have influence in another way? So there's lots of turmoil. And I think that one of the most important things that we can keep in mind thinking about resilience is there was a brilliant book, it's called The Resilience Myth. And it talks all about how there's this story of, this lone hero that just forges through like a tank of resilience. And actually that research doesn't buttress that. And true resilience is about interconnectedness and about relationship. And so the more that we can connect these leaders who are in perhaps pockets of climate-friendly values and behavior and incentives, connect them together, the less they feel isolated and the more they can shore up courage and whatever it takes to get through this season in the US. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I'd say is that you talked about how a lot of them have somebody above them they need to influence, and then it's that person who's often being whipped about by contrary messages. So how do you help these people influence someone above them? And I think so much of climate leadership is about influencing without authority, whether you're influencing laterally, up. And I actually just ran a workshop with a colleague of mine for New York Climate Week about this exact thing. So how do you influence without authority? And so much of the time, it's about tapping into whatever the person above you is trying to solve. How are they evaluated, for example? What do they care about? What problems do they have that you can solve for them, while also bringing them closer to a more sustainable solution?
We look at this very, very much. Let me tell you how we try and help.
Yeah, tell me.
So carbon reporting is a tax, think some. And you know what? It's kind of like the data protection fee. Every business pays its fee. My SME, I think it's £60 a year. It's a tax on data. protection. We don't see any benefit from it. And carbon is very much viewed the same by so many businesses. We're back to what's in it for me. And for the buffeted leader to whom your clients are reporting in upwards, they've got to adjust their messaging to get that leader on board. And we've got one very, very large client right now, been with us a while, huge corporation. And their challenges are led by a banker through and through. Everything is money. And he's very good at his job, but everything is money. And when you have these people on an absolute money, hey, can we talk about ESG? Got to adjust the messaging, got to bring this person on board. So I've already touched on how the majority of your carbon emissions are in scope 3. That's a lot of carbon. What is carbon? What are carbon emissions? In a nutshell, they are your money going up in smoke, leaving an exhaust. It's money which you're sending to landfill. If you have no waste, if you were generating 100 tons of waste a year and you reduce it to 1 ton of waste, that is that much product you didn't purchase or pay to have shipped into you. With me so far? All carbon in your carbon report is waste. It's been exhausted, it's been incinerated, it's been buried. So, as the majority of your 96% exists in just one carbon reporting category, GHG protocol, scope 3, category 1, purchased goods and services. Then we can start off, because we know where they're spending their money proportionately on different types of goods and services. We start with anywhere up to, it can be 5 indirect cost categories, it can be 50. We can progress to 55 or more. We've got the carbon data, we know the spend, we know it's with whom. So can we help the client procure better to reduce their spend with their client and each supplier, rationalize their supply chain, make consolidated, make it more efficient, and thereby drive down their carbon footprint? Because so, in point, hotel group, reasonably large, but not one of the giant group of hotels. We started this process. How much do you spend on electricity? It was a lot. Where is it being spent? Well, it's being spent on generating hot water and heating the swimming pools. So and that's just an example, if we introduce some technology which makes any water-based heating system or air conditioning system automatically 20% more efficient, and your electricity bill goes down 20%. If we help negotiate with the right electricity supplier, it goes down even further. Now, what's happened to your carbon footprint? Maybe it's halved. Go even further, switch to a green tariff where all of the electricity is carbon neutral. Now you have zero carbon electricity. You've wiped out your carbon footprint, but you've also halved the cost of halved what you spend on electricity. And if you do that, you're not just saving money this quarter or this year, but maybe a 3 or 5 year window. So it becomes a message of, hey boss, you hired me in on this role to do a job. I've done the job, strengthened the business. If added, in the case of that one particular hotel client, $625,000 a year saved. Bottom line savings, cash in the bank.
Very good. So with that, the CEO you mentioned then, who had the banking background, I take it that was a successful message to translate some of these changes that needed to be made.
That one's ongoing. In other words, it's a difficult one to really follow that thread, but it's a competitive world out there, and that client is in a very, very, it's a cutthroat competitive industry. The top talent gets poached right one after the other. So if we can quantify, it's a standard ESG metric, how many people did you employ last year? How many people left the business last year? How much did it cost to replace each of those people who left? So what's wrong? Because nobody left a job they absolutely loved. Nobody left a boss they absolutely loved, unless something else is broken. So just by focusing on staff turnover and fixing those gaps, you can turn that into a money equation. Hey, You've got all the recruitment fees. You've got the loss of productivity that many people coming into a role, even where they are experienced, can take 3 to 6 months to really settle in and make an impact. Well, let's quantify that. What about the IT and HR resource? Because somebody on a salary of £60,000 a year costs their employer £100,000 a year.
In HR, IT, other resources?
Yep. Benefits, Class 1 and Class 2 national insurance contributions, sick leave, you name it, whatever benefits you have. And many accountants will tell you that if you employ somebody, your actual cost of employing them is double their salary. They split the difference. But it's one thing for sure, in the UK, it's never less than 30%. So, how many people left the business? Why did they leave? If we fix that through the right evaluation of ESG, it could be what's happening a lot right now is the organization does not reflect the values of the people it has employed. I don't fit in here. I don't like the ethos. I know they're not a City of London law firm, but it's a significant provincial firm north of London, north of London. And the law firm is set up as a limited company, and the directors want only one thing: money. It's not about practicing law, not really. It's how much can we squeeze? How much can we invoice our clients this month? And I know of people leaving this firm because it doesn't reflect their values. If you're a private client solicitor, you want to be looking after, you're dealing with, you're preparing people's wills. You're working on the probate for that firm. If it's all money, bill, and by the way, your billing target went up 20% this year, but we're paying you the same, they leave. How much does it cost to replace that person? So it's a case of ask, what is the business not doing, which is causing staff turnover? You see, ESG can be, and we've moved way on from net zero. You see, net zero is just this tiny piece of the whole picture. Carbon reporting widens it. That's about transparency. Move on from this almost absurd, precise target of the carbon in which you are in direct control. Widen it, be more transparent. Tell us about what you're doing about your waste. Bang. That is a good chunk of the E, but it's not by no means all. The bigger, well, what are you doing to use fewer harmful products? Eliminate hazardous substances from your manufacturing process or the goods you sell, to rationalizing your supply chain, realizing savings from that process, to then the moving into the social. It's the people, retaining people, attracting the best talent, get them to approach you. Then you don't have to use recruitment consultants, and there's a benefit for mankind. So that the message to the senior leadership team is, hey, listen to me. We're going to start with net zero. We're going to do it right. We're going to extend our carbon reporting, and then we're going to progress into ESG. We're going to quantify this against rigorous standards like B Corp or EcoVadis or the GRI if they're a not-for-profit. And we're going to I am going to save this organization an awful lot of money and enhance its reputation. So when it comes to, for instance, an RFQ, I've got the answers. I can tick the boxes. We as a business can tick the boxes. The business development manager can tick the boxes. Yes, we'll take those 20 or 30 percentage points on which our bid is assessed, and we're going to take all of those 20 or 30 points on sustainability. They're in the bag. Now let's move on as to what we can do with our products and services and why you should actually select us. We've got the capacity or whatever. So then we're strengthening the message often with clients who don't realize, actually, hey, we're doing ESG, but we're doing it in a language they understand. Progress so far with this banker is to be able to say, Mr. Banker, we've got one mission. We are going to save you money now, immediately, cash, bottom line, balance sheet, and not just now. It's not a one-time saving. It's not buying a thing for 20% less. It's year on year on year savings. And we went into one client, a financial services company, quite prestigious, international. What was it? The professional indemnity insurance premium, £237,000 a year. Now, within a week, we dropped that to somewhere in the order of 120,000. They didn't save that 117,000 only on that first year. They saved it in years 2 and 3 as well. That's a message. Oh, and guess what? That makes the rest of what we're doing self-funding.
Yeah.
So your clients in the US can, and what's happening in the US, they're not talking about DE&I anymore.
No.
That's bad. That is a bad phrase. It's dead. It's just been rebranded. We call it employee engagement. We'll call it whatever we want, but we just won't call it DE&I.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too. I think it's easy to, I think especially in the UK media, the way the UK media is representing what's happening in the US, it looks like so much is screeching to a halt, but actually it's a lot going on under the surface. People are creatively repositioning the mission, rebranding, like you say. There's actually a lot happening that's perhaps not making its way to the front pages over here. So people are becoming very agile in how they respond to this as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's an evolution. ESG has been an evolution.
Yeah.
And carbon reporting, I was very late to the party. I mean, if you go back to T17, nobody was talking about carbon. It wasn't a thing.
What do you think's, what's the right word, propelled it to becoming more front and center?
Well, there is climate change. It is making an impact. There's plenty of science on both sides to debate genuinely whether it's all human-induced or whether it's natural cycle. I keep an open mind on all of it. But my father was in Antarctica in 1957, 58, 59, and 60. And it was then in the International Geophysical Year that they first noticed the hole in the ozone layer. Now, that was 1958. In 1996, I was working in a corporation in California where we used vast amounts of acetone. And the reason we used vast amounts was it kept evaporating. We're talking hundreds of gallons a day. And acetone, PFCs, straight up into the atmosphere. Ozone, gone. And then the Earth spins and the ozone, we end up with the ozone hole getting bigger and bigger. Contrary argument, actually, last couple of years, suddenly the ozone hole is recovering. Two sides to every story. So it's not necessary. I think the big problem we've got is it's all human. The UK is 1% or whatever it is of total emissions in the world is going to make a hill of beans difference or not. Well, it's not going to, and anyhow, we've already crossed the 2.5 degree threshold. Difficult stuff, but nonetheless, we've got to try, because if we don't, then it's just going to get worse and worse. And the Chinese, while they are still operating coal-fired stations and building more, they are going green at a frightening rate and leaving everybody else behind. So we ended up with net zero. Do you know that was a slogan dreamed up by somebody in the back of Downing Street while Theresa May was Prime Minister? It just had a nice ring to it. No science. Far enough in the future that whoever pushed it forward and made it government policy wasn't going to be held to account, but near enough that it causes businesses to have to jump through hoops. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that there's been a big disconnect. It's been made very difficult for businesses to conform. Why is it that the SECR regulation demands reporting on scope 1 and 2? And there's this throwaway, well, and you should probably do business travel. That impacts every business turning over £40 million or more, £36 million or more, 250 employees, or £18 million on the balance sheet. Any two of those three criteria is all you have to do in terms of carbon reporting. A micro SME, a business of less than 10 people looking to supply the NHS or the local authority or the local school, have to conform with PPN 006. Scope 1, Scope 2, 5 categories of Scope 3, signed off, published on a separate webpage on their website. The government, successive governments, can't blame any one in particular, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and small businesses are struggling, which has been an own goal by government in getting people behind the plan. And then buy diesel cars, they're good. No, don't buy diesel cars. We're going to punish you if you now drive a diesel car we told you to buy. Drive an EV. No, we're going to fine you if you have a charging lead trailing across the pavement. But there's mixed messaging all the time. So we can't influence government directly. It'd be fun. What we can do is make life easier on every business to change the market. Carbon reporting is not just a hassle. It's a benefit to your business because it helps you save money. That appeals to their profit side. It's good for your people because they're breathing cleaner air, as an example. And it's good for the environment, the planet, because we're making less waste. Carbon is waste. Don't waste. Make more money. Be nice. And if the government had just focused on that, we wouldn't be in this endless barrage of politicians and everybody else trading insults. This person, that person. Is Trump the baddie, or Miliband the baddie, or is it actually, are there some really sane people somewhere in between?
I'm convinced by the science, and I think that the real danger we're looking at now, and I've heard this talked about in climate circles, is that doom is the new denial. And so if we lift our hands up and say we can't do anything, it's too late, that's actually more dangerous than climate deniers, which are now a very small minority. There's so much that we still can do, and every % of a degree of warming makes a difference. I think that it's very privileged for us, especially in the West, to say, oh, it's too late. When you've got a farmer with 8 kids in Bangladesh for whom, if we give up, it's going to get even worse for them. And of course, it's hitting us in different ways, but we're not at the sharp end of climate change just yet. Part of what I keep working on climate is the reason I'm still doing this is I've got 2 kids, 2 and 5. I think there's no way I'm going to give up, even if it feels like we're broaching different thresholds left, right, and center. If we give up, then it really is over. And one of the things that keeps me going also is that systemic change is so often slow and halting and happens in pockets, and then it happens all at once. So I look back at history, I think of the suffragettes, think of the abolitionist movement. None of those people even knew what would happen when they began to create that change. And so I think in business too, we may be the pioneers of doing business differently. We may not even see the conclusion of our actions, but it's still important on a moral ground to do it for the sake of next generation.
Absolutely. I cannot agree with you enough. And it's like the campaign against plastics. Look, I get it myself. The ban on drinking straws has nothing to do with the tonnage of plastic used to create and distribute plastic drinking straws. I forget how many hundreds of millions of these things were being consumed annually, but it's still an insignificant amount of plastic. But what it has done very effectively, I think, is just nudges every single person who was going to a McDonald's or a whatever. It's paper, because plastic is harmful. Plastic is carbon. Plastic is contributing to climate change, and it's also poisoning the fish. And totally agree. We can't stop. Now what we have to do, from an ESG Pro point of view, what we can do is help business people everywhere see that there is a logical business argument for tackling these subjects they don't really perhaps know very well. And you're training people to advise these businesses to go into a business and start their jobs on a successful footing. Sounds like a win-win.
I think so.
Megan, how should anybody who's listened here get in touch with Future Led? Wrap it up with a little summary of Future Led, your website, and all the rest.
The best way to get in touch is by looking up my company. It's Future Led, which is futureled.earth. So futureled.earth. And that's where you can find out all about me, how I work, how to get in touch, and how I might be able to help you and your leaders.
It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. We've spoken for about 57 minutes, and it's been wonderful. For me, I have really enjoyed this chat.
Well, likewise. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
For everybody who's listened, thank you very much. I'm Humperdinck Jackman. Thank you very much to Megan Fraser of Future Led, ESGPro.co.uk. We are free with our advice. Give us a call. Likewise, pick up the phone, send an email to Megan. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.